In the wake of the cordyceps brain infection outbreak and the failure of the United States government to handle the pandemic, the Federal Disaster Response Agency, FEDRA, worked with the military to seize control and impose martial law. This allowed them to herd citizens into fortified quarantine zones as a way to try and contain the spread of the infection. However, after 2 decades, many QZs have fallen, and very few people across the United States live under FEDRA control. Despite the defeat of the revolutionary Firefly Group, which sought to restore the pre-outbreak US government, the military is notable by its absence, and it's far more common to come across people organised into bandit or hunter groups, factions such as the WLF, Seraphites or Rattlers, or trading communities like Jackson. Few QZs are confirmed to remain operational. This begs the question, what has happened to FEDRA, and what remains of the military-controlled US government? In the lead up to the outbreak back in 2013, the military's initial containment actions involved setting up roadblocks in order to prevent the spread of infection into major urban centres. They would go so far as to shoot anybody found trying to enter, often not bothering to check their infection status. Following the outbreak, and the failure of efforts to develop a vaccine, the military would announce the removal of bureaucrats from power, allowing them to do what was necessary to protect the country. This would involve the establishment of QZs in major cities, and the building of walled fortifications to close the zones off from the outside. Initially, they would attempt to evacuate citizens in neighbouring areas to the zones, but following a World Health Organization report estimating 60% worldwide infection, the military would maintain patrols around a 10-mile perimeter of the zones, but not go further to try and evacuate trapped citizens. It isn't known exactly when the military and FEDRA amalgamated, but once martial law was declared and the civilian government overthrown, the two would very quickly become interchangeable. After taking the decision to suspend evacuation efforts, the military would soon resort to bombing areas outside of the zone in the hopes of wiping out the infected, leading to widespread destruction. Yet the aggressive spread of the infection, coupled with resistance to the FEDRA rule, made this increasingly difficult. Rationing was implemented in the zones to handle supply and distribution issues across the country, and despite this persisting for 2 decades, it was an inadequate response to difficulties. Food shortages were rife in many zones, with responses ranging from a black market in meat from animals such as rats in Boston, and massive protests of starving people in Seattle. The Fireflies emerged in response to the declaration of martial law and attempted to coordinate nationwide resistance. Branded a terrorist organisation, suspected members would regularly be rounded up by the military and executed. Their actions ranged from distributing propaganda to blowing up checkpoints and other insurgent actions. They would also reach out to non-affiliated dissidents in the zones in order to help them rebel and try to recruit them. This included the uprising in Pittsburgh, though the citizens there would reject and turn on the Fireflies after overthrowing FEDRA. To try and maintain control, FEDRA would impose regular checkpoints, curfews, and work duties within the zones in the hopes of both maintaining order and minimising infection, with punishments such as revoking ration cards or solitary confinement for lesser offences, and execution for more serious ones. Zones such as Pittsburgh and Seattle would refuse entry to refugees, or even expel citizens in order to limit resource shortages. And FEDRA also potentially killed refugees in many instances rather than just turn them away. However, these actions were unsustainable both in that they failed to address the underlying scarcity problems, and that they increased citizen discontent and unrest. The Seattle QZ fell to the WLF in a brutal civil war. The Pittsburgh QZ was overthrown in riots. The Hartford QZ appears to have collapsed from mismanagement and been abandoned by FEDRA as a result, based on reports from refugees trying to enter Boston. Las Vegas fell to infected, whose wails can be heard from beyond the walls due to their vast numbers. Fireflies had bases in the military abandoned zones of Salt Lake City and Dallas, and potentially others, though these appeared to be outposts rather than fully populated communities, and their fate is unknown since the group disbanded. Only the Boston, Atlanta and Denver zones were operational when last reported on. The fate of other known zones, Chicago, Detroit, Los Angeles, Providence, Portland, San Francisco, Springfield and Woods Hole, are unknown. However, we know that in the wake of the military's defeat, zones such as Pittsburgh and Seattle saw food shortages continue and get worse. Whilst the Washington Liberation Front regime in Seattle was able to centralise supply distribution and oversee farming and production to make a sustainable community, the residents of Pittsburgh degenerated into hunters, ambushing and killing travellers to survive. This suggests a lack of pre-existing infrastructure to grow food or produce other resources, which in turn suggests other zones similarly lack this. And we know that even the still functioning Boston zone sends its soldiers on scavenging missions. Even if FEDRA's Central Command, whose location is unknown, has such infrastructure, it's clear from the continual and widespread food shortages in zones that they're unable to reliably supply it. This in turn hints that any surviving zones are facing inevitable collapse at some point in the future. Whether their fate is the result of rebellion, mismanagement and abandonment, or uncontrollable infected outbreaks, only remains to be seen. This makes communities beyond the zones far more sustainable than FEDRA rule. Jackson grows crops, produces clothes and other goods, and trades. And other similar communities are highly likely to exist across the country. Even communities more actively hostile to outsiders, such as the WLF and Seraphites, locked in ongoing conflict, or the Rattlers, reliant on slave labour, are sustainable in that they don't need to scavenge from a world 2 decades gone in order to survive. This leaves the fate of FEDRA and martial law in the United States down to 2 possible outcomes. Either it will end out of sight of the majority of the population when the last quarantine zone collapses, leaving infected hordes, dying hunter communities, or something more sustainable in its wake. Or the Central Command is somewhere better upkept than the zones, and those soldiers and officers who survived the fall of the zones are falling back to it and bolstering its numbers. The major piece of evidence in favour of that outcome is that whilst the military has abandoned many zones, the remaining ones are not taking in either refugees or new recruits from outside the walls in any significant numbers. Instead, they too are stagnating and falling by degrees. So there is perhaps a surviving central hub of military rule somewhere out there, surviving, maybe even thriving, even as its grip on the rest of the country crumbles. This in turn begs the question: will that central FEDRA command be content to lose the country and merely survive in isolation and obscurity? Or is it regrouping with some greater intent that other communities, both friendly and hostile, not to mention the reforming Fireflies on Catalina Island, will not see coming? If you enjoyed this video, then please give it a like and consider subscribing to keep up to date with all my content. Like the video that just popped up, which YouTube thinks you should watch next. This is a Patreon and member supported channel, so if you want to become a member and unlock custom badges and emojis, early access to my videos, and your name in the credits, then click the join button below. Thanks very much for watching, and see you next time.